Good evening, fellow commissioners. The City of Titusville Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting of March the 17th was now called to order. Let's please rise and pledge allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Chairman Severs,
Present.
Vice Chairman Spidell,
Yes?
Secretary Richardson,
Present.
Member Grant,
Present.
Member Rice,
Present.
Member Parrish, Member Porter,
Here.
Alternate Member Riley, Alternate Member Childs.
Here.
As I see it, we Member Parrish, and we'll be talking a little bit about Member Parrish in a few minutes, is not available, nor is alternate Member Riley. Normally, I would rotate. Mr. Childs, since you served last time, she would, but she's not present, so you'll be the designated alternate representative for this meeting. We appreciate you being here, sir. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of March the 3rd. Are there any additional additions or corrections to the minutes? Member Richardson.
I make a motion we approve the minutes of March the 3rd.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Let's have a roll call.
Member Grant,
Yes.
Member Porter,
Yes.
Member Childs,
Yes.
Secretary Richardson,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Spidell,
Yes.
Member Rice,
Yes.
Chairman Severs.
Yes. Attorney, would you like to read the notice applicable to the meeting?
Sure. In order to help prevent the spread of the COVID-19 coronavirus and to comply with all local, state, and federal laws and guidelines regarding social distancing rules, designated seating shall be provided for the public at Planning and Zoning Commission and other city board meetings. Individual speakers shall, when directed to do so, be given the opportunity to speak on agenda items during the meetings in accordance with City of Titusville policies and resolution number 36-2020. No tripods, easels, props, or other demonstrative aids shall be brought into public meetings of Planning and Zoning Commission and city boards. Speakers are permitted to have a sign with them during their designated speaking time, provided that the sign is held by the speaker and is to be removed at the conclusion of their speaking time. Speakers who appear in person will be subject to screening for symptoms of COVID-19, and any persons exhibiting any symptoms of COVID-19 will not be permitted to enter City Hall or public meetings of Planning and Zoning Commission and city boards. As an additional method for public participation, the public may submit written comments via email to planning@titusville.com or by regular mail to Planning and Zoning Commission's attention at City Hall, 555 South Washington Avenue, Titusville, Florida 32796. Written comments must be received by 12 noon prior to the start of the meeting and include the sender's name, address, and the subject line must specify the agenda item being addressed. All comments will be disseminated to the Planning and Zoning Commission members and made a part of the public record prior to any action being taken. All persons who anticipate speaking on any public hearing item must fill out an oath card to be heard on that agenda item and sign the oath contained thereon. These cards are located on the table near the entrance to the council chamber or may be obtained from the recording secretary. This meeting will be conducted in accordance to the procedures adopted in Resolution number 24-1997. Those speaking in favor of a request will be heard first, those opposed will be heard second, and those who wish to make a public comment on the item will speak third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. A representative from either side, for or against, may cross-examine a witness. Anyone who speaks is considered a witness. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents that you desire for the commission to consider, they must be submitted into evidence and will be retained by the city. Please submit such exhibits to the recording secretary.
Thank you. There's no consent agenda items or old business. Under new business, we do have a quasi-judicial matter, so I'll read the quasi-judicial confirmation procedures. Certain items under old and new business may be public hearing items. Individuals desiring to speak on those items must fill out an oath card and sign the oath contained thereon. Those cards are located near the entrance to the council chambers or can be obtained from the recording secretary. Some items which will be identified by the chairman are quasi-judicial. As I see, item 9A is quasi-judicial. I don't think B would be. In addition, the quasi-judicial proceeding will be conducted in accordance with the procedures adopted in Resolution 24-1997. Recording secretary, have all persons wishing to speak signed an oath card?
Yes, sir.
If not, if anyone wishes to speak, they must submit an oath card at this time. Staff, have all public hearing agenda items been properly advertised?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Has any commission member visited any of the sites or spoken to any member of the public regarding the quasi-judicial items? Yes, Member Spidell.
As a customer to Home Depot, I pass this.
Okay,
location.
I have too.
Chairman Severs, I'd like to provide an update. I think we hear some feedback because Member Riley is on. She had some technical difficulties at the start of the meeting, and so she said present, but you couldn't hear her.
Okay. Let me just finish this and we'll address that. In the event a member has received any ex parte communications, the identity of the person with whom the communication took place and the subject of the communication must be disclosed, including opinions, facts discussed, any written communication must be made a part of the record. Site visits must be disclosed. I think we've had a disclosure. Member Riley, are you on the phone now?
I'm on my computer.
Okay. It is your turn to participate as the alternate since Member Parrish is not here. Do you desire to participate at this meeting?
Well, I want to be reflected that I was present here. If Mr. Childs wants to do it, I'm fine. Yeah, I don't want to.
Well, it's what I do is alternate from one meeting to the next as far as who. So it's your pleasure. If you want to defer to him, I'll leave that up to you. If not, you will be the voting member. We did change the rules at the last meeting whereby alternate members can listen and participate, but perhaps cannot vote on a particular item. What is your pleasure?
I'll defer to Mr. Childs.
Okay, Mr. Childs, you'll participate then. Thank you. The first item under 9A, rezoning Home Depot out parcel, Windover Trail, council, staff. Staff.
I'm sorry, I was writing my notes. Did you have, can you repeat your question?
Pardon?
Did you have a question for me?
No, thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. The item begins on page 11 of the agenda packet. The subject property is a 1-acre outparcel zoned community commercial. The applicant proposes to rezone the property from the community commercial zoning district to the regional commercial and remove site-specific conditions of a 2008 rezoning. The future land use designation shown on page 12 is commercial high intensity. North of the site contains a Wendy's restaurant. South of the site lies a Home Depot retention pond. East of the site, across Windover Trail, contains Crossroads Marketplace. And west of the site is the Home Depot store. Ordinance 11-2008 contains the site-specific conditions of the 2008 rezoning that was proposed for future development that ultimately did not move forward. A public meeting was not held in accordance with our requirements, as the applicant stated that they met the exceptions requirements of the ordinance. Staff does recommend approval of the rezoning action, and the item is before you all today, as staff is asking for guidance in making the determination whether public meetings should be held before the rezoning request can be approved. That concludes my presentation. I can answer any questions you have.
So as I understand your question, you're inquiring of this commission, since a meeting has not been held, should we go ahead and proceed with the item? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is the public meeting, that is attempt, that is to give notice, a mandatory requirement of the code? Attorney, if you want to.
We haven't not used it as far as language. It hasn't been not used in past rezonings. I don't know if you like.
Do you happen to have the language handy, attorney? Okay.
Okay, so the section is 34-13, community engagement. There's a section A that talks about the purpose, and then a section B that talks about the applicability. And section B2 talks about particular exemptions. So the code does provide for certain exemptions of the applicability, and I believe that the applicant wanted to argue for one of those exemptions tonight, which is why it's on the agenda. The applicability section, I'll read to this commission so you can make your own decision and go forth from there. I could read the whole section if you'd like me to, but I think the applicability is the most relevant for your decision. I think you understand what the purpose of the community engagement meeting is. So applicability reads, 1, every application for development that requires a land use change, rezoning, master plan, or development agreement shall include evidence of a community engagement meeting that must be conducted at least 14 days prior to the first public meeting conducted by the city. Evidence of a community engagement meeting is required prior to the item being considered in a public meeting conducted by the city. So that's the applicability. And then section 2 says, when in compliance with all other city ordinances and regulations, the following projects are exempt from the other provisions of this section. A, construction of 10 or less residential dwelling units regardless of density. And B, amendments to an approved master plan or development agreement, provided that less than 10% of the total acreage of the master plan or development agreement is subject to the amendment, or an increase of less than 10% of the number of residential units or square footage of non-residential development. Now, in the interpretation of construction of 10 or less residential dwelling units regardless of density, I believe that exemption would only be applicable to a residential application, because that would allow for all commercial applications to be exempt, and that's not the intent of the code. So you would be looking only at the amendments to an approved master plan or development agreement, which neither of those apply here. So that's my interpretation, and after meeting with planning staff agrees that the community engagement meeting is a code requirement. However, the applicant is here to plead his case.
Okay, before asking the commission, does the applicant representative like to be heard and state your feelings as far as compliance with the community meeting requirement? Yes, come on up. Yes, please, go ahead.
Good evening. May I remove this for clarity?
Yes, yes, you can.
I'll step back so I don't get anything on the microphone. Good evening, members of the commission, chair. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak on this. So the item before us is a basic rezoning, reversing a previous rezoning action that took place back in 2008. At that time, some conditions were placed on the rezoning that were site-specific and that are no longer relevant because that project never went forward. It was never developed. It's been sitting there, just these conditions static and up in the air unused for these last 13 years. We're now coming before you to rezone this as part of a outparcel site plan application that's being done on the other side of this site. This is just an extension of the existing Home Depot parking lot, and there is no change to Home Depot's master development of their site plan here. They're ultimately still operating the same store. This is just an extension of their parking. So the site that we're talking about today, the rezoning, is only 1 acre. The total Home Depot site, which Home Depot owns this parcel, and they will continue to own this parcel after this transaction takes place, is 16.5 acres. So this particular item is, a parcel is only 6% of Home Depot's total site plan. As such, we believe it falls under the 10% threshold in order to require the public engagement meeting.
So were you aware of the code provision dealing with a public meeting requirement?
In full transparency, I was not aware of it.
You were not aware of it?
I was not aware of it, no.
Okay, okay. Any questions by any of the commissioners? Member Richardson?
So as I understand it, this particular parcel we're talking about, rezoning from CC to RC, is just to be expanded parking lot for Home Depot.
Correct. The site that we're developing on the north side of Home Depot's parking lot next to the car wash,
Yeah.
to the west of the car wash, there we're doing a single or 2 tenant little retail operation. I have some renderings that I brought in case they were relevant for our conversation. But so you're correct. So our agreement with Home Depot is that in order to develop the north side, because that would have brought them below the required parking, is that we will go ahead and pave and add the additional parking capacity on this previously unused portion of their land. If you're familiar with that site, it's been for sale forever. The one on Windover facing the Target. It's really challenged because of its location offset back from the main road, so they've never had any success in trading the property. And this sort of became a situation where we're like, well, this might be the best of both worlds. It creates more accessible parking for the consumer at Home Depot, bringing more spots closer to the entrance and to the garden center, and also creates a situation where we can have, hopefully some quality tenants for you for the north side.
So you need us to do this in order to develop the parcel just north
On the north
car
side,
wash.
correct. There is a specific condition in the 2008 rezoning that took place where there's a 10-foot landscape requirement going all the way around the property. That would have made sense with the development that was intended, which had an east-facing, sort of like a Tire Kingdom type of, mechanic store, and that would have created a visual barrier from the Home Depot parking lot to the back side of their operations. In this case, we're talking about a continuation of Home Depot's existing parking, so creating that landscape buffer on the west side of this parcel would create an impediment to consumers being able to get to their car. It reduces the number of spots that we could do. And as a matter of fact, the balance of the site does have landscape buffers, sometimes far exceeding the 10-foot. And again, I have a drawing of that here if you wish to see it.
Just out of curiosity, asking you probably an unfair question,
I'll take it.
but what are you planning to build on the RC parcel?
The design of the building, which again, I have a picture I can show you, is a 2-tenant property with a drive-through restaurant on one side of it, and the other side would be consumer goods.
So it's not just Chick-fil-A.
So I'm glad to answer that question if you like. Anecdotally, that would create a parking nightmare for Home Depot if we were putting Chick-fil-A there. But I know that everyone is very eager in Titusville to have one.
Okay, I think we need to answer the threshold question. And I'll open it up to any other commissioners have a view on this or want to make a motion to, in essence, table the item to give the applicant time to do the necessary attempted meeting, or saying they either have met the requirement, waived the requirement as such. So, Member Rice.
Yeah, my questions are mainly for staff, not for the applicant, but I just want to make sure I understand that it says subject parcel, but this is not a real parcel. It's part of the overall Home Depot parcel. So is unity of title is not required here? Is that a correct statement?
That is correct.
Okay. The other thing is the items that were in the rezoning, there's a couple of them that would still apply. okay, but there's pretty standard anyways as it comes in. Like stormwater, you have to prove that the stormwater,
Correct.
Pervious surface in the existing pond is sufficient to handle the treatment that's required for the parking lot. So that condition, it really doesn't need to be there because it's standard in our land development regulations. But then all existing codes, current codes on the parking lot would exist as the code reads today. Is that a correct statement?
That is correct.
Okay, because landscape buffers have changed also.
And
Okay,
we do have that.
okay, all right. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Okay, anyone else have a comment or observation or motion? Just as an observation, we're going from CC to RC, and generally speaking, I would assume that RC is more intense in use than CC in this ordinance grand scheme, and whether or not anyone in Wendover along the trail would want to comment about that, I don't know, or get notice of it, I don't know. But just as an generally speaking, on lots of issues for advertising purpose historically, if it was a less intense use, even if the advertising was for the more intense use and you drop down to a less intense use, it did not require re-advertising as such. And I see the attorney shaking her head, but this is not that situation. It's not that situation.
If I may chime in with one question?
Certainly.
You asked me earlier if this was the first time I was made aware of the engagement thing, when it was just brought to our attention earlier last week. The reason why we weren't unaware of this particular requirement is because as part of the rezoning checklist application, there is a part there where there is notification to the X number of
Within
feet
500
surrounding
feet.
the area, and there was a fee paid for that. So we were under the impression, naively, and it's our fault for not knowing further, that was the notification requirement by the code, that letting the neighbors know that something was in play. We didn't realize that there was an above and beyond engagement requirement.
Okay, thank you. So I'm coming back to the commission member Rice. You want to make a motion?
Well, I guess I do have a question for the applicant because I agree it is a more intense use, but if it's going to be a parking lot is a parking lot, and would you object to the condition that we approve this with the condition that it's a parking lot?
I have no objection to that. Ultimately, Home Depot's entire site is zoned RC, so this is just bringing the balance of their site to be, equivalent, or to bring that parcel to be equivalent with the rest of theirs. So I have no issue, but I can't say, I can't speak on Home Depot's behalf. We're not Home Depot. We're the applicant ultimately for the north out parcel portion.
Okay.
So to agree to a condition that would be for Home Depot's land that they're going to still own after this would be out of place for me to do so, I think legally. But I know that that's the intent. That is what we are contractually required as part of our purchase agreement with them to perform parallel in conjunction with the building of our site. We have to pave that parking. That is what they want there.
I mean, the premise of this rezoning is the basis of being a parking lot.
Correct.
I mean, throughout the entire document, that's basically what
And
it
in the
says.
future should, and again, I can't speak for Home Depot, but should in the future they ever desire to, again, put that piece of land for sale that we're in question right now, developing that would now bring their site underneath the parking requirements per code. So that would come before you again for other reasons.
Well, it can't be for sale because it's part of the parent track. I already asked the question whether it was an out parcel that was a separate parcel under the property appraiser's thing, and it's not. It's part of the parent track.
I'm just
So
speaking, yeah.
it can't be sold off unless they do a minor division, okay, or a lot split.
Correct.
So, I'm not too concerned about that.
Do you know if a Home Depot representative will be at the council meeting for approval of this item?
I don't believe that they will be there. I can ask either if you'd like communication with them ahead of time, or I can see if they can send a representative.
The reason I'm asking is because if the planning and zoning is going to suggest a condition that's different from what's proposed, then we need the applicant to agree to that,
Okay.
either in writing or in person.
I'm sure in writing I don't foresee being an issue, but in person I don't know where their representation is, if it's in Georgia or locally. But we're open to all solutions. We're here to work together.
What is the size of this parcel?
The parcel in question, the parcel, if you will, is an acre out of the 16.5.
It is 1 acre.
Yeah, out of the
Okay.
16.5 of total Home Depot area. And again, it's part of that 16.5, like the gentleman
Okay.
mentioned, it's part of their property.
I haven't double checked, but my recollection, the minimum size for RC is 1 acre. Is that correct?
I can check.
Okay.
But
In
again,
any event, it meets the requirement, so it's not a non-conforming lot as such.
This is not a separate,
I hear you, but tomorrow, if they had an offer of $2 million for that tract or parcel, whatever you want to call it, and they decided to accept it, and there was going to be built on there a restaurant on the CC, they might do that.
but wouldn't they have to come into the city and do a lot split or a minor division? And they could not sell it other than that? Is that correct statement?
I don't know. The way I look at this tract or parcel is, it is currently a separate parcel, which they're putting back with the main parcel. And they chose to have separate zoning for it as community commercial, not RC. Yes, sir.
Well, that's why I asked the question about unity of title, because if it is a separate parcel, that's a different animal than if it's part of the parent tract and it was just a leased parcel that they could possibly lease. But if it's a separate parcel, that's a different ballgame to me.
I guess I have to defer to staff. I mean, isn't this a separate parcel? Theoretically, they could sell it off, subject to those conditions that exist? I mean, that's the purpose, that's why they had it identified separately, so they could do that.
may I ask, understanding the greater question for us now is the community engagement portion of it.
Yes.
Is it possible for us to take that responsibility on now before the first hearing? If you approve the rezoning, can we meet the community engagement requirement before the
Well,
first
we
reading?
perhaps could have when is the public hearing on this? April 13th? So they have time in which to have the 10-day notice.
14 day,
Correct?
14 day. 14 days.
And they do have time to do the 14 days. So is planning and zoning willing to continue and add that as a condition, subject to prior to the advertised public hearing before council, that they have
I would just like to go back to the ordinance to answer Woody's question, to make sure that this is clear. The ordinance title calls out that this is a portion of property. And so that to me says that this out parcel is just a portion of the entirety as described. And it's approximately 0.997 acres in size.
No, all that tells me is that that's the way they've legally described it. A lot of parcels are a portion of Lot A or something. That doesn't, I don't know from the city standpoint whether it's a master plan approved, if this was a part of a master plan, and this is a separate, is a part of that, and we're just implementing the master plan. I don't know. I don't have that information. But I'm certainly willing, as one commissioner, to proceed with that condition. But that's up to majority of the commission. Yes,
Chairman
Member
Severs.
Spidell.
Just to answer your
Yes, go
question, that regional commercial, that lot minimum is 2 acres.
2 acres. That's another
Okay,
problem.
as I understand it, this parcel or this lot, or however we're characterizing it, has been for sale for quite a long time. Is that correct?
As far as I understand, yes.
Okay, and so you said never mind on the sale.
Well, we are not Home Depot. We are a separate entity.
Okay.
Looking to develop a property in Titusville.
Okay,
We saw that property for sale.
Yes.
evaluated it, deemed that due to its setback off of the main traffic, that the visibility, also Home Depot has maximized all of their, site signage that is allowable, that there would never be any, enough traffic for a commercial tenant to be viable. We approached them and said, what are your thoughts on selling us instead a portion of your frontage that you have on Ronald McNair, Cheney, that whole intersection?
Right.
And in exchange for that, in order to ensure that you maintain your minimum parking spot requirements and to improve your site, we'll go ahead and take this site that you've been trying to sell and pave that and make it usable for your store. And they agreed.
And they said, good deal.
They were actually really wondering why they didn't come up with that idea previously.
Right. Okay, and you were happy too.
Yes,
And there are no surrounding properties except for commercial.
correct.
Okay, their Windover development does not encroach even close to this property, correct?
If you look at the address labels within
Yes.
500 feet, there are addresses on Windover that are included that received notice regarding the notice requirement that was described earlier, which is different from the community engagement meeting. The community engagement would send a letter to the same folks that received notice, inviting them to participate in a community engagement meeting that has to happen at least 14 days before the public hearing.
Okay, and
And the public record does show that the parcel ID listed in this ordinance is a 16.5 acre parcel.
okay. Thank you.
Okay. Concerning the merits of your application, is there anything else that you want to talk about with regard to your request?
No, in the grander request, we feel it stands on its own.
Okay. All right. Any other questions of the representative? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you all.
Any other cards on this?
No, sir.
Okay. I'll close the public hearing and come back to the commission for additional questions and/or motion. Member Rice.
Okay, so it is part of the larger tract, so it's not a separate parcel. Unity title's not gonna be required. So if they were to develop it as a separate building, they would still have to come through and do a lot split to be able to develop this as something other than a Home Depot
Yes,
building.
my understanding is that the applicant plans to take the portion that's currently used as a portion of the current parking lot to sell it to the applicant who is here before, the gentleman who was here before you, and his agency will be developing it as a separate business, separate and apart from Home Depot. So the 16.5 number will go down, but I don't know by how much.
Right, but he's gonna have to get owner's authorization to develop it for Home Depot, and Home Depot
Either-
owns the other lot.
Either owner's authorization or a lot split.
Okay. And then, as far as the community meeting, it has been determined by staff that they're really exempt from having to do that.
Staff did not make that determination.
Staff did not make that?
No, that was the applicant's argument, but they've agreed to hold one before the council approval of this item, as discussed earlier. So I believe that the commission should make a condition, not of this ordinance, but of the item, saying that a community engagement meeting will happen before the council final approval.
Okay. All right, and, okay, so you're saying that staff did not make the determination that that wasn't required? I thought your initial statements were that it met the conditions where it was not required to do that.
No, I did not say that. What I was trying to explain is that these exemptions exist in the code. However, the city still believes that a community engagement meeting is required.
Okay. Who makes that determination then in the city to say whether it's required or not required?
We haven't had a scenario where this issue has come up because all applicants have had the meeting.
Okay. Okay, then I'll move for approval of, let's see, what's the number on it? Of 1-2021 with the condition that they hold their community meeting prior to the public hearing for city council.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by Member Richardson. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Not seeing a roll call.
Secretary Richardson,
Yes.
Member Porter,
Yes.
Member Childs,
Yes.
Member Grant,
Yes.
Member Rice,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Spidel,
Yes.
Chairman Severs.
Yes. Okay, that concludes that item. It's, council is to hold a public hearing on April 13th. Try to make sure you get your meeting. Next item, Willow Creek Tract R-4 acceptance. Staff.
The Willow Creek Commercial Center Phase 1 plat approved by City Council in 2004, which includes the Willow Creek Boulevard, has remained under private ownership as Tract R4. Subsequently, Tract R4 was sold to KB Home, the developer of Verona. Today, KB Home is requesting the city accept the right-of-way prior to approval of the Verona plat Phase 1.
Thank you. Any questions of Member Richardson?
No.
Member, excuse me, do we have any questions of staff at this stage? Not seeing any. Do we have any cards on this item?
Yes, sir. Rodney Honeycutt.
All right, Mr. Honeycutt.
Good evening, Commission. Rodney Honeycutt, 3700 South Washington Avenue. Really, I'm just here to see if you have any questions of me.
Any questions? Member Rice.
Yes. Is this the parcel, Mr. Honeycutt, between the commercial part and the residential part? Is that where this right-of-way is,
Yes, it's on the west end of the commercial parcel.
on the west end? And I noticed that this is 130 foot across right-of-way, and when I look at the other right-of-ways, one's 50 feet or 100 feet, and the other one it doesn't say. I just wonder why this was an extended length.
So, track R4 was intended for continuation of that Willow Creek Boulevard right-of-way when the commercial area was platted. So when KB Home purchased the acreage for the residential development, they also purchased tract R4, so they would have that access.
Okay.
So it was
just
always
a matter of
intended to be
cleaning
that.
it up.
Okay, any other questions of the applicant? Not seeing any. Thank you, sir.
I'll be here if you need me.
Any other cards?
No, sir.
Okay, come back to the commission. Any questions, comments, motions? Yes, Mr. John.
Yeah, I know I'm new at this, but I noticed that the recommendation from staff is just that we review it and we make a recommendation. Is this a normal thing for us to take back a land and to make it a street? Is that something that happens a lot during development, I guess? I don't know.
I don't think that this happens often, and I don't know that the language on this summary is the best way to have been phrased, because my understanding is that this is a necessary action in order to have a thoroughfare with our public utilities under it.
Okay.
And so the city does in fact recommend approval, and the report to council should reflect that.
Okay.
So my apologies for any confusion on this
Right, yeah.
report.
It was just different.
But if you see under the alternatives, that would be what I would recommend you make a motion to, if you wanted to, recommend approval of the right-of-way acceptance.
Okay.
Has the Public Works Department provided a letter saying it's in compliance with our codes and regulations?
The road is up to standards.
Pardon?
The road is up to standards.
I know that in our meeting that the road was built to city standards. I don't see documentation in the item here tonight, but
I mean, typically, I would assume there would be documentation showing from the Public Works Department, the city engineer, recommending acceptance.
We can recommend that that be included for the city council item. I don't have it
Okay.
here tonight.
With regard to Willow Creek Boulevard, is that going to be a public street? Further on to the west?
Yes.
I
it's
assume so. Okay.
It's connecting public portions to
So if we
allow
didn't
connecting-
recommend this, we'd have a hiatus in the middle, so to speak, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion or motions on the item? Mr. Rice?
I'll move that we recommend acceptance of the right-of-way as proposed.
Okay, wait, second?
Second.
Member Porter, seconds. Member Spidell, did you have a question?
No, I'm having difficulty hearing Mr. Rice.
All right, roll call.
Member Grant,
Yes.
Secretary Richardson,
Yes.
Member Childs,
Yes.
Chairman Spidell,
Yes.
Member Rice,
Yes.
Member Porter,
Yes.
Chairman Severs.
Yes. Okay, next item is City Council Summary of Action. I think that's primarily information. Does staff have any comments concerning that?
I don't have any comments. Thank you.
Okay. No one on council, commission have any questions? Okay, proceeding on to the next item is city staff report.
Nothing to report.
Pardon?
Nothing to report.
Okay. City attorney? Well, let me ask, I asked the last meeting two things. One was about the tree ordinance and the advertising. Do we have an update on that?
The tree ordinance has been sent to TEC. That's currently where it stands at the moment.
Will be sent to TEC for its April meeting.
And when would the public hearing be?
Well, there will be several. There's going to be the Planning and Zoning Commission subsequent to TEC. We don't know if it's going, we doubt that it will be the meeting immediately after TEC the following week. That wouldn't allow staff time to incorporate anything from that TEC meeting, so we expect it'll be sometime in May.
Expected to be when?
Sometime in May?
Sometime? The TEC meeting, when
No,
is that?
The Planning and Zoning meeting.
I'm talking about the TEC meeting first.
The April regularly scheduled TEC meeting is going to be on April 14th.
April 14th?
Yes.
And then it will be coming to the Planning and Zoning Commission after that, is that correct?
The same version, yes.
Okay, okay. And the other question, as a follow-up, last meeting I asked about Brookshire, about whether or not they were going to submit additional plans to comply with ordinance number 27-2019. I've asked two meetings. This will be the third meeting I've asked about it. If we don't know, that's fine.
I do not have that information, but I can bring that for you next meeting.
Okay, I would appreciate it. Thank you. City Attorney?
The only information that I think is important to discuss, I think you'll cover during your report regarding the leave of absence for Member Parrish.
Yes.
Other than that, I have no report.
Okay, thank you. Under my report, the first item I passed out to you a draft of a memorandum that I prepared to the City Council recommending a leave of absence for Commissioner Parrish. I received a communication from her indicating the need or necessity for personal reasons to be absent, which I fully understand. I know her, as I recall, our assistant city attorney advised me that Member Parrish would not be at the first meeting she missed because of personal reasons which are consistent with this. So I think it's entirely appropriate that we recommend to council that they grant her a leave through the month of April. We are blessed to have alternates that are present, ready and willing to serve, so I don't see there's going to be a problem for the commission as a whole. Member Richardson, your light is on.
Well, that was not what I had my light on, but I'll make a motion that we recommend to council that they approve the leave of Commissioner Parrish.
Do we have a second to the motion? We have a second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Those opposed, no. Okay, it passes. Under my report, I did cover the tree ordinance, and I noted, and probably most of you may be aware of this, that's been in the news, that the Brookshire property was sold and now is being developed by Avex Homes. I noticed one of the news articles about the sale, which was according to the news articles and also according to the property appraiser's office, was $3,154,000. That the 166-acre family homes reflected a plan in the article, which is the sketch plan. It isn't correct. I don't know why, but it isn't even the correct plan for Brookshire. And as we all know, there's significant improvement going on and land clearing pursuant to those permits. It will be of interest to me down the road whether the project will comply with the 10% preservation requirement that's currently under the code. I believe the approved plan, and I'll just say this up front, does not. And how in the world final plat's going to be approved for a plan that's in violation of the code, time will tell.
Sir,
But yes,
have you shared a copy, or do you have a copy to share of that article with staff?
I certainly can get it to you.
Thank you.
Okay. In addition, significantly, they have the retention areas in the wrong location in comparison with the approved plan as such.
And this is a plan that you said that you got from a news article?
Yes. Talk of Titusville. There was an Orlando Sentinel article about it as well. There's been several articles about it. It's nice to see that this applicant or developer plans on building 1,800 to 2,800 square foot houses, which are larger than the average house being built in most of the subdivisions that have been building lately. This article says the average size has been 1,546. That's been selling for around 232,000. So these will be larger homes. This company apparently is primarily based in Orlando and Tampa, as I understand. This is their first venture into Beaufort County as such. I don't have any other reports. Any other commissioners have a report? Member Rice, do you have anything you'd like to bring up?
Yes, at our last TEC meeting, we had some very good discussion, but on November 11th on TEC, we sort of went through a priority list and came up with ideas of what we felt were the priorities of TEC for this coming year, so we could concentrate more of our efforts on those higher priorities instead of the ones that weren't. And when we did that, we had about 17 different items that were listed, and we each had dots we put on where we felt our priorities were. And the number one priority was stormwater runoff because of the river. Number two was environmental metrics, because we need to know environmentally where we're at, so we can understand what the issues are. If we don't have metrics and to understand that. The third one was low impact development. The fourth one was basically solar power, and then those got to capture the most votes. The other items either had one or two votes on them, but there were total of 17, with 2 of them getting 0 votes that were on the list. In our last meeting, we had a really good discussion on stormwater, and actually it sort of rolled into metrics, because some of the questions we were all very concerned about the condition of the water at the Indian River. We wanted to understand do we know what's going on at the river? And so we had discussion about inviting an expert to tell us a little bit about nutrient loading and things like that. But then we also asked questions whether we had sampled all of our stormwater outfalls. And, it goes beyond just what B maps are with nitrogen, phosphorus. There's other impurities. And do we know what's going into the river? Because if we could sample and identify where the pollutant sources are, that's the first step in identifying how to correct it. And so we had a lot of discussion on that, and we're collecting some information and going to have staff tell us a little bit more about the cost of sampling, how long should we sample, can our labs do the analysis so we can look at all of our outfalls. So we had a really good discussion on that. The other item that we brought up was grass clippings, with a lot of that going down the storm sewer and going out. So we decided that we would be a little more proactive and try to develop a educational piece that may be able to go out in our renewal notices for business tax receipts for landscape businesses on how the importance of grass clippings and not to blow them down the sanitary stormwater sewer system. And so we're looking at that. We're looking at ways to do that. We currently have a piece where if you're a home-based business, there are certain requirements there, and that goes out with the business tax receipts. So we'd sort of model it like that. So that notice would go out every year for landscape businesses, just to reinforce how important this is and other things like that. We felt that was something that was really important to try to tackle and educate the public on the importance of grass clippings and not allowing them to go in the storm sewer. Then we actually talked about Arbor Days coming up, and we talked about planting some trees up in Sandpoint at the stormwater ponds and doing some things for Arbor Day in that area. That's pretty much the extent of our last meeting. And I will confirm staff did say the tree ordinance was coming to us at the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Rice, for that report. Member Richardson, you have your light on.
Well, today at lunch, I had lunch with a couple of friends, and one is a member of the Chamber of Commerce Board, and I was disturbed to learn that the Chamber of Commerce will be briefed on the tree ordinance meeting, not next week, but the week after, before TEC has been presented. We've all gotten copies, but we've gotten copies of 4 or 5 proposed ordinances. And apparently Peggy Busaka is going to present the proposed ordinance before the Chamber of Commerce Board. And I think it should have been considered by TEC first, and then us second, and then gone public. That's all I have to say.
Member Rice, let me just ask you this. I don't recall which meeting I kind of prioritized a number of issues I saw outstanding. Is it part of your recommendation that the Planning and Zoning Commission do somewhat this similar? If we see that there are outstanding issues that need to be addressed, that we prioritize those, or what, do you have a recommendation
Well,
as far as this board?
I'm sort of getting my feet wet with P and Z. I mean, it was a little easier with TEC because, I mean, our focus is environmental. It's strictly very environmental. And then with the things that were happening in the river, you know, it just made natural. I just want to make sure that we were focused as a commission on what our priorities are. Because, you know, if we make good, solid recommendations to City Council when it comes to funding and process and all those things to tackle some of those major issues, you know, we'd like to concentrate on what we felt was the major issues. I mean, surely anything that TEC brings forward would go through P&Z also. I'm pretty sure it would. I don't know if maybe it wouldn't if it's just an environmental issue or not. So maybe you can share with me. I don't know if the process is TEC making a recommendation to P&Z and P&Z makes a recommendation to City Council, or does TEC make recommendations straight to City Council? You know, I don't know that I totally understand the chain of command from committee to committee to City Council. But I think if we had priorities as a commission, as a P&Z, I mean, it's a good exercise. It was definitely a good exercise for us to do and conduct.
Well, perhaps not the next meeting, but the following meeting. Let's keep in mind maybe towards the end of that meeting that we have everyone come prepared with maybe our priorities as far as issues that we feel as though need to be addressed. And so it would be the second meeting in April that perhaps we could do that. One of the things I've mentioned several times, and I think if TEC comments upon it, occasionally I see a street sweeper. I have suggested in the past, when the oak leaves are falling along the river or near the river, and please have the street sweeper out sweeping those up, because if we get a good rain, guess what? It all goes out into the river. And just automatically schedule it that way. And I think that's just a common sense thing to do. And just with the city street sweeper, I know the people in other subdivisions want their streets swept, and I understand that, but they could do timing wise when the leaves are falling and falling in the street and in the gutters, and they're going to go out into the Indian River, which they do. Let's make an extra effort to capture those. And that's just a common sense kind of thing that can be done. With regard to the condition of the river, I appeared last Thursday before the City Council, made a comment about the condition of the river this last summer being the worst that I've ever seen. And it appeared I was questioned by some council member as to whether that was correct. And Mr. Rice, you're very familiar with the river like me. I've been here more than 50 years. And I don't think there's any doubt that the condition of the river has declined significantly over the last several years and this last summer, and even the condition today. This time of year, you should be almost able to see 2 feet down in the water column. You can't see more than 6 inches down in the water column today after, you know, a fairly cool winter. And that just foretells to me this summer what it may be like. And I would hope that rather than just saying, Well, it's a bigger issue than Titusville. It's a county-wide issue, which obviously is. But in my opinion, we need to do our part, whatever that is. If we need to improve our discharges into the river. I recall way back when the stormwater utility was created, and there were, as I recall, 6 basins, and we were studying each basin, and all of those funds were going to be utilized for purposes of making improvements in the stormwater system as a capital project. And then as time goes by, it was recommended by certain city managers that the day-to-day operations of maintaining ditches and come out of the stormwater utility, and all those funds got diverted over primarily to taking care of maintenance, ordinary maintenance of the stormwater system. So I appreciate what TEC is doing. If you can find out why our river this year, this last year, as bad as it was, I certainly like to hear it. Yes, sir.
Well, you're right, in the fact that, I've lived on the river for 30 years, and it so you can hear me better, for 30 years, and this has been something that really has caught my attention of being probably one of the worst years with water quality at the river. I mean, it just from an appearance standpoint. What the discussion, and unfortunately, the one meeting that I was sort of not on TEC because I had been appointed to P&Z, but wasn't reappointed to TEC yet. The Stormwater Division did come and talk to TEC, and they went over the things that they were doing with B-maps and all the requirements, and they went through some of the nitrogen and phosphorus removal criteria and the efficiencies of different type of stormwater and improvements that you can do to get that. And in that report, they stated that approximately $200,000 annually is out of the Stormwater Division to take care and do water quality projects, okay? And then they also had a diagram in there that showed that the goal of the phosphorus and, most of the emphasis is on phosphorus and nitrogen removal, and we had to meet a certain standard and get 100%, going by memory, but I think it was 2035, and we were already at 42% of achieving that goal of what the BMAP recommendations were to achieve in 2035. So we're on our way, at least from a phosphorus and nitrogen level of treatment. But what discussion we really had was, all right, well, what else do we have in our outfalls that we don't know that we have? And, we don't know that we have any problem until we sample and we find out, what's going on here. And then, is there one outfall that is more prevalent in phosphorus and nitrogen, or is it other heavy metals or other things that are causing some of the issues? So those were discussions we have. It may come to find out that the city is actually in very good shape. But we just don't know what we don't know yet, okay, basically. So that was a lot of our discussion was around that. How do we get there? How do we identify what the issues are? And is it the City of Titusville issue? Where can we make our improvements? Where should we concentrate our money? In what basin should we concentrate the money in? If one outfall is worse than another outfall, and those are the things. And what we, at the last meeting when we had the discussion, we didn't have anyone from Stormwater there. And the Stormwater management team probably has some of this data. And so we're trying to collect the data to see what they have and what are we doing, what is the priority, and do we have a list, and do we have samples? How long do we need to sample for to identify it properly? The thing with samples, you have to have qualified people, you have to have a qualified lab. You really want to sample at every major storm event because that's where the pollutants come in, is during a storm event. If you go out and it's been dry for 7 days, you do a sample, you're probably not going to get much.
all right? And if you went out and there was a storm on Saturday, and then there was another storm on Tuesday, and you went out on Tuesday to sample, you're probably not gonna get much, because the first flush happened on Saturday. Okay, so it's just little things like that that you have to pay attention to, and have a plan of how you sample, when you sample, and the frequency of sampling, so we can identify where the issues really are. That was our concentration.
Okay, Member Childs, you have, Member Grant, do you have your light on?
I have a question for Mr. Rice. After all this time, we don't know what the culprit is that's causing the degradation of our river. I mean, other cities down the line, I believe I read something recently where their areas improved.
Well, I'm going to answer that. The TEC doesn't know what the degradation and the cause of our river. I don't know that there aren't experts on staff that have that information. We just haven't been privy to that information. And that's sort of the line we're going down, is to try to understand, because we look at our arm as, what we need to understand, is there something educationally we can do to help inform the public better? We've done a lot of good things, like the fertilizer ordinance and things like that, okay? But, we just don't know yet what we don't know as a TEC, as a commission.
That was going to be my next question. I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt because you're smart I am on this thing, but that was going to be my next question concerning ordinances. Is something that we can fix through ordinances or something like that? I mean, something needs to be done, and it needs to be done quick.
Well,
I mean, if you know a particular thing that's happened, say for instance, grass clippings. I know that's just a minor part of it. But we say grass clippings is contributing to the degradation of our river. Then there should be some sort of ordinance that says, do not blow grass clippings out in the street. They get washed back into the, in the drainage system.
Yeah, we do have a lot of those regulations, but it's an education piece, and that's where we decided with grass clippings that we're not educating enough out there to
and
let
how
the
do we go
public
about
know.
educating? I mean, I don't.
I'm sorry.
I'm trying to figure out how we go about educating people about.
Well, that's where we came up with having a flyer that goes out annually for landscape businesses, how important it is not to blow stuff down, because a lot of the work from a landscape standpoint are done by these landscape businesses. And so that would be a great first step. And then we can figure out how to reach out to the common homeowner and educate them a little bit on the same topic. But to answer your question, I mean, you really have to identify the sources first before you know what plan to put, okay? And the city might have that information. We just haven't been exposed to it as TEC yet.
After all this time, we don't know what's causing the problem?
No, TEC doesn't know. I don't know if the city doesn't know,
Why would the city keep that a secret?
And we're going to reach out to, I mean, we don't know, we need to reach out to St. John, DEP. They do a lot of sampling too, and they probably also know, okay? And just.
Why don't we just ask them?
Tried to and that's how we directed staff, okay, was to collect this information and work with staff to see what we have and what we do know, okay? And bring it back to Titusville Environmental.
I'm not trying to put any blame on TEC. Please don't interpret it that way. I'm just wondering, after all this time, all the years that we've seen this problem, because I came here in 82 or something like that, and it was pristine. Not anymore. Somebody recognized it when it started going down, but no one's done anything about it. I mean, I won't say no one has done anything about it, but it seems to me that there would be more information on hand that everybody would know about by this time, about what is causing the problem. Is it grass clippings? Is it leaves in the road? Is it fertilizer on the lawns? Then start somewhere. Start with an ordinance or something.
Believe me, I understand your frustration.
Well,
and I appreciate the fact that the city has implemented a number of projects under the BMAPs, et cetera. However, The bottom line is it's getting worse, not better. We can congratulate ourselves all day long that we're ahead of schedule, which is great. However, we're behind, simple as that. And I agree with Commissioner Grant that it appears to me the city doesn't want to take any ownership of the problem and address it head on, that it's too big of a problem, it's a county-wide problem, yes, it is. But as I see the money that we are all paying in to clean out ditches and muck, primarily in Merritt Island, the beaches, and South County, that's not going to help fix our problem up here in North Brevard whatsoever. And our problem is worse than theirs as far as the water quality in the Indian River. And so I know we want all these new houses and new development, et cetera, but at some point in time, you need to help take care of your own citizens, the infrastructure needs, which includes the Indian River, because it's failing, and badly, as you say. And I think we have a responsibility to our own citizens that seems to be very secondary with regard to priorities in the scheme of things. And Member Rice, you had a comment.
Yeah, a couple things. One is the one thing, the pollutants going into the river don't know any boundaries. Okay, it doesn't stop at the city limits. It doesn't begin at the city limits. Okay, so got to keep in mind this is a very big issue for our community in the state of Florida. Okay, to address. From a pollutant loading standpoint, new development, the standards have gotten pretty good. We've learned a lot over the years with new development in stormwater design and LID and phosphorus and nitrogen treatment trains and all those things. That's great for new development. But we do very little for existing problems. And there's where we have a lot of impervious surface that isn't getting treated at all. And to me, that's what we need to start looking at is where are these impervious surfaces and where are the pollutants coming from existing, because we're not addressing that issue very rapidly, okay, with existing. Although, we've done some good things. We had the alum pond at Broad Street, which took a lot of effluent. So that was a major project for the city that made a huge improvement for that basin. That's just one basin. So we got to identify those sources through all the basins and see where these pollutants are coming from and concentrate our limited resources, because they are limited resources, in those areas that we can capture the biggest improvement for the money that we do have to fix.
Member Grant.
Again, I say that the cities, I've read somewhere some of the cities, I believe south of us, maybe even north of us, their water quality is much better than ours. What are they doing different than we are? I mean, if we don't know what to do, why don't we ask them? Simple as that.
Okay.
To me, well, nothing is simple anymore, is it? But
Doesn't
come on,
seem to be.
Doesn't
seem to be. All right, Member Richardson, did you have anything else on your report? Member Spidell?
I'm good. I would like to appreciate the fact that Ms. Rice is serving on both commissions. I think that's a benefit for both of us. So thank you. Thank you, Woody, for serving on both commissions. I think that's an addition to both of the commissions, that your knowledge in your field, in your experience, but the communication that you're providing. I think we're all trying to make the same improvements. And your contribution to TEC and your communication with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Grant, anything else? Member Porter? Not hearing anything else, the meeting is adjourned.